Hello and good evening. You're watching AWANITonight with me, Farhana Sheikh. The generational endgame GEG element has been removed from the revised Control of Smoking Products for Public Health 2023 bill, which was tabled for the first reading in the Dewan Rakyat today. The bill is the ministry's third attempt to enact legislation of the anti-smoking law.
The GEG policy would have prohibited smoking or purchasing smoking products, including e-cigarettes or vape, to those born in 2007. Instead, this new version of the bill prohibits the sale of tobacco products, smoking substance or substitute tobacco products, or provide any services for smoking to a minor. The amended bill was tabled by Health Minister Dr. Zaliha Mustafa, who then proposed the bill to be tabled for the second reading on Wednesday. The original version of the anti-smoking bill was tabled by then Health Minister Kyrie Jamaludin in July 2022.
The strong lobby by tobacco industry players is the reason the generational endgame GEG element in the anti-smoking bill is dropped, according to Kyrie Jamaludin. In a strongly worded Instagram story, the former health minister said while this is a win for the big tobacco and vape industry, the fight to protect Malaysians' health was far from over.
With the removal of the GEG provision in the new version of the bill, Kyrie said the country was missing out on passing a consequential landmark legislation for public health. The former Rembau MP also dismissed the argument used by the government put forward by the Attorney General's chambers, which said that the GEG element was unconstitutional. Kyrie had previously said that the GEG bill was suspended due to political pressure, not legal issues. He reiterated that in his Instagram story. GEG, he said, was dropped because of the strong lobby from tobacco companies in Malaysia, rather than legal arguments of the unconstitutionality in its implementation.
Meanwhile, the government has been conducting an audit on subsidized cooking oil in every state and district since October this year to resolve the issue of leakages. Acting Domestic Trade and Cost of Living Minister Dato' Arman Mohmad says the audit will help the government to streamline the method for granting cooking oil subsidies.
According to him, the government's target is to complete the audit in January. Arman also said that the government needed to come up with a mechanism to prevent leakages and misappropriation of subsidized cooking oil, which were detrimental to the people. The government originally allocated 500 million ringgit in cooking oil subsidies for this year, but projections showed that the figure would increase by about 4 times to some 1.9 billion ringgit. Separately, Arman said a special cross-ministry committee on the implementation of targeted subsidies for RON 95 petrol had been established. On Monday, Economy Minister Rafizi Ramli said the government would introduce the mechanism for targeted subsidies for RON 95 in the second half of 2024.
The government has no plans to implement the Goods and Services Tax GST this year and next year. Deputy Finance Minister Dato' Maslan said this because the government wants to focus on targeted subsidies first.
Responding to a question by Senator Dato' Sivaraj Chandran about GST in Dewan Negara, Ahmad Maslan said the previous administration had implemented a 6% GST instead of 3% at that time because there would be no additional tax that the government could obtain if it was set at 3%. He added that Malaysia is the only country that has implemented GST and then withdrawn it, albeit for political reasons rather than economic reasons. Commenting on the benefits of GST, he said that it can reduce the shadow economy, which he said had accounted for 30% of the country's GDP before the implementation of GST.
Permanent disaster relief centres will be established immediately with the pilot project to begin in 9 states. Prime Minister Dato' Sri Ibrahim says the initiative involves a ceiling cost of 5 million ringgit for each centre and is set to provide better protection for flood victims than temporary relief centres.
He added that as the country faced floods every year, it is unreasonable to only have temporary relief centres. Anwar was replying to a question from BN's Datuk Shamsul Kaha Muhammad Dali as to whether the government has plans to improve basic flood relief facilities nationwide. Anwar added an early allocation of 241 million ringgit had been channeled for use in 164 districts to manage flood disasters and the northeast monsoon season. He said pre-flood preparations have also been stepped up through community-based disaster risk management and that the Department of Irrigation and Drainage has identified 5,648 flood hotspots.
MACC will not unfreeze accounts of Aman Palestine and is ready to fight the NGO in court should the organisation take legal action against it. Chief Commissioner Tan Sri Zambaki said that the anti-graft agency is prepared to present justifications to the court regarding the frozen assets.
On Monday, Aman Palestine Berhad said it gave MACC 3 days to unfreeze its accounts or face legal action. Azam also dismissed Aman Palestine's allegation that MACC's actions were a planned conspiracy to commit character assassination towards the organisation and its board of directors. MACC had confirmed freezing 41 of the NGO's bank accounts, amounting to over 15 million ringgit. The freezing was carried out after MACC investigated allegations of Aman Palestine misusing public donations.
We'll go for a quick break. Stay tuned for more.
Mengumumkan tawaran kencang untuk mak, ayah, ada maklum dan ramai lagi. Tawaran istimewa untuk pelanggan Astro yang setia. Dapatkan 500 Mbps hanya RM90 sebulan. Dengan router Wi-Fi 6 yang pantas. Dapatkan Astro Fiber 500 Mbps hanya RM90 sebulan hari ini.
Asia tumpuan utama dunia. Dengan ekonomi yang semakin rancak, pembangunan lestari dan tenaga boleh diperbaharui, apakah pula impak kecerdasan buatan AI dalam perkembangan teknologi dan masa depan pekerjaan? Kami mendalami setiap berita dan cerita. Saksikan diskusi, dialog dan laporan khas di Agenda AWANI Asia bersama koresponden khas kami setiap Sabtu 9 malam di semua platform Astro AWANI.
Welcome back. Indian rescue teams are close to reaching 41 workers trapped in a collapsed tunnel in northern Uttarakhand state. The workers have been stranded in the 4.5-kilometer tunnel since it caved on November 12th. Officials said they were set to pull the trapped workers out one by one to safety on wheeled stretchers through a 90-centimeter diameter pipe inserted through the rubble. No one have been reported injured and the workers have been getting food, water, light, oxygen and medicines through a narrow pipe. What began as a rescue mission expected to take a few days has turned into weeks. Rescuers had resorted to manual digging after a drilling machine broke down on Friday because of the hard-packed terrain around the tunnel. Meanwhile, updates in Gaza, more hostages have been freed following a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas that has entered its 5th day after a 48-hour extension was agreed. A total of 33 Palestinians, 30 children and 3 women have been released from Israeli jails following the freeing of 11 Israeli hostages from Gaza.
The Israel Prison Service said prisoners were released from the Offa prison in the West Bank and from a detention center in Jerusalem, bringing the total number of Palestinians it has freed since Friday to 150. Qatar, who is mediating the hostage exchange, said the focus now is on extending a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel beyond Wednesday, based on the group's ability to continue releasing 10 hostages a day. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Majid Al-Ansari said that was his nation's aim in a press briefing on Tuesday, but he said Qatar was unable to validate the number of remaining hostages. An Israeli government spokesperson said on Monday that the total number of hostages still held in Gaza was 184.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has warned that more civilians will die from outbreaks of diseases than from bombings in the Gaza Strip. Weeks of airstrikes from Israel have led to more than 1.5 million people crowding into shelters with little to no access to food and clean water, and the collapse of the health system.
WHO spokesperson Margaret Harris told a UN briefing in Geneva that more people will die from diseases than from bombardment if Gaza's health system is not put back together. She repeated concerns about a rise in outbreaks of infectious diseases, particularly diarrheal diseases. Harris also described the collapse of Al-Shifa Hospital in northern Gaza as a tragedy and voiced concern about the detention of some of its medical staff by Israeli forces. Gaza health authorities say more than 15,000 people have been confirmed killed in Israel's bombardment of Gaza, around 40% of them children, with many more dead feared to be lost under the rubble.
Indonesia election campaign officially began today with candidates kicking off 2 months of touring to woo voters ahead of the legislative and presidential elections on February 14th. Defence Minister Prabowo Subianto, former Central Java Governor Ganjar Pranowo and former Jakarta Governor Anies Baswedan are vying to replace outgoing leader Joko Widodo after a decade in power.
Surveys have indicated that Prabowo is leading, with Ganjar second and Anies a distant third. Ganjar, the ruling party's candidate, began his campaign in the easternmost province of South Papua. Anies, meanwhile, began his campaign by visiting homes in a densely populated area in the capital Jakarta, promising to reduce the price of basic foodstuffs and increase job opportunities. Unlike their competitors, Prabowo and his running mate Gibran Rakabuming Raka, the eldest son of Jokowi, did not hit the ground on the first day, and instead both turned up at their respective offices to continue their work as officials. The candidates will take part in debates organized by the Election Commission in the coming weeks, although no schedule has yet been announced. Some 205 million of Indonesia's more than 270 million people are eligible to vote in the elections next year.
In other news, Australia will ban imports of single-use e-cigarettes starting next year, cracking down on the nicotine products that are popular with youth. The ban will come into effect on January 1st.
Health Minister Mark Butler said the ban will be expanded in March to include all non-therapeutic vapes, including refillable devices, while importers of vapes for medical purposes will need a permit from the Office of Drug Control. The legislative package will also include 75 million Australian dollars in extra funding for authorities to enforce the new rules. Additional legislation next year will apply the same prohibitions to domestic manufacturers. Despite having one of the lowest rates of smoking in the OECD, vaping in Australia is growing rapidly, especially among the young. According to government data, around 1 in 5 people aged 18 to 24 vape.
That wraps up AWANI Tonight. I'm Farhana Sheikh. Thank you for watching.